Okay, but why aren't Celeste's parents going to jail too? After taking a couple of days off, I've been monitoring several cases. It was getting a little overwhelming, especially the preliminary hearing, which ran a lot longer than I expected. We were exposed to a lot of grotesque evidence, right? A common question I keep seeing in my comments is, why aren't the parents in jail too? Everybody who let Celeste down should be in jail. Honestly, it's a fair question. I understand that a lot of people want there to be some sort of legal consequence for these terrible decisions, myself included. However, I had to stop and remind myself that that's not how the law works. Before we jump in, I am a certified law nerd, bona fide non-attorney. This is not legal advice, just my interpretation of everything I've researched in this case. So let's begin. Okay, let's establish what we actually know. According to testimony presented during the preliminary hearing, David and Celeste were involved in a sexual relationship while Celeste was still a minor, as young as 13 years old. We also heard testimony from the detective that both families knew they were spending time together. According to that testimony, David even attended church with Celeste's family. And on day 5 of the preliminary hearing, we learned that Celeste's parents signed notarized consent forms allowing her to travel internationally with David. Those are the facts that have been presented publicly so far, and it's understandable why people are looking at this and asking, how is that not criminal, or even, how are the parents not being held responsible for Celeste's death? Myself included, so I looked up California's child endangerment laws, and here's what I found. In California, prosecutors generally have to prove more than just poor parenting. They have to prove that a parent willfully caused or permitted a child to be placed in a situation where the child's person or health was endangered. Now, as an example, let's use the London trip because that's one of the facts that has everybody stirred up. A lot of people have asked, how could you sign paperwork allowing your 13-year-old daughter to travel internationally with a 19-year-old? I asked the same thing. My first reaction? Absolutely not. My 19-year-old son barely gets that kind of free reign. But legally, that's not the end of the analysis. Let's say that the parents were told that David's parents would be there to chaperone. Let's say there would be adults supervising all over the place. Let's say that they told the parents, or they genuinely believe that Celeste would never actually be alone with him. Does that automatically make it good parenting? Absolutely not. I don't think it does. But with that hypothetical, could we honestly say every legal element of California's child endangerment statute has been met? That's the harder question. Remember, prosecutors have to prove that at the moment those decisions were made, not in hindsight, at the moment, every legal element of a specific crime was met. They can't simply look back after a tragedy and say, well, because the outcome was horrific, the decision that led to it must be criminal. That's not how criminal law works. The same thing applies to criminal negligence. Most of us hear the word negligence and immediately think they failed to protect their child. And morally, I understand why people feel that way. But criminal negligence asks a different question. It's asking whether someone acted with such a gross departure from what a reasonable person would do that they created a legally recognizable criminal risk. We're going to use the text messages as an example, the Discord communications, the secret phones, and the allegations that this relationship continued despite attempts to separate David and Celeste. Legally speaking, prosecutors don't just ask whether a child had access to social media or whether parents made decisions that, in hindsight, appear reckless. They have to prove that the parent's conduct itself meets the legal definition of criminal negligence. For example, if prosecutors could prove a parent knew an adult was actively abusing their child, knew the abuse was ongoing, and still intentionally continued facilitating private access to that child, that's a very different legal conversation than simply arguing that parenting decisions look terrible in hindsight. Two very different standards. Now, don't shoot the messenger here, but we actually have facts that point in the other direction. There is no public evidence that they helped conceal what happened to Celeste. There is no evidence to suggest that they participated in Celeste's murder or helped David cover it up after the fact. Prosecutors have never made any publicly available information to suggest that they were criminally involved in the act that led to the loss of life. Okay, I can literally hear you typing up your fiery response. Let's put a pin in that for a second. I want to talk about the cultural aspect of this, and this is going to make some people uncomfortable, so be it. Now, Celeste and I are both from the Latino community, and this is not unique to the Latino community, so try not to get stuck there. However, I, as a member of the Latino community, can speak to this based off of my personal experience growing up. I have grown up with both ends of the spectrum. Real quick before I lose this thought, El Salvador, which is where Celeste's parents are from, does have a national age of consent of 18, yet the country still struggles with a historically high rate of teen pregnancies, and this age gap between boys and girls is not uncommon at all. We've heard a lot of dialogue about that online, and it is true, I can attest to it. It's not as frowned upon and very normalized for young girls to be with older men. On one end of the spectrum, you had parents with a much looser approach that would think, okay, I'd rather know where my daughter is than have her sneaking around. I think the thought process was having them have their relationships out in the open could minimize the risk, and the trust and dialogue is open between parent and child. On the other end of the spectrum were families like my own that said, no, you're not going anywhere, period. No, you cannot go to your friend's house. Yes, you can go to your cousin's house. No, you cannot sleep over. It was very much a no vas a ningún lado porque uno nunca sabe. And a lot of people in the comments had very similar sentiments to my own family, which was I'd rather chain her to the bed than allow her to have access to that predator. And I understand that morally, however, that's illegal too. We can't commit a crime to prevent another. But here's the thing, a lot of teenagers are very determined. I came from the second category of very restrictive parents, and I still got pregnant as a teenager. I'm not saying that this is in any way Celeste's fault. Remember, Celeste was the child. There were a ton of adults, including her accused murderer, and nobody protected Celeste. At the end of the day, the only one that did not have the maturity or legal capacity to make these types of decisions was Celeste. The prosecutors alleged that she was groomed and sexually abused. And after reading those text messages between Celeste and David, my God. And I won't be sharing that on this platform. They are too explicit. I'm sure other creators have already shared some of those messages. I'm not touching it. Several things can be true. Terrible parenting decisions were made. Yes, there was a predator that should not have been allowed access to a child that young, but it's really hard to say with any level of certainty whether how restrictive or how lenient those parents were would have had any real impact when we have a predator who was going after junior high students and allegedly paying them to hand a phone over to a young girl. Just because they're not facing legal consequences as of now does not mean that they're not facing any. It's not every day that you sit in a courtroom while a medical examiner describes in painstaking detail what happened to your child's body. It's not every day you're confronted with photographs showing the decomposed and dismembered remains of your own child. It's not every day you have to hear detectives read intimate text messages between your young teenage daughter and the man accused of killing her. Whatever conclusions we may reach about the parenting decisions that came before this tragedy, those images and those words don't go away. And while I understand the outrage people are feeling, I feel some of it too, I think it's also important to remember that the person accused of putting Celeste in those conditions, the person accused of taking her life, was sitting at the defense table during the preliminary hearing. Those ideas are not mutually exclusive, and the preliminary hearing was not about whether Celeste's parents were in the right or wrong. It wasn't even about whether David was guilty. It asked one question: was there sufficient evidence for David to stand trial? The judge answered yes. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please keep it respectful. The fundamental question for this video is, do you think there's a difference between terrible parenting and committing a crime? Or do you think that terrible parenting is in and of itself a crime? Make sure you like, share, subscribe, follow, do all of the things so that I can continue to bring you these updates. I'll catch you in the next one.